Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. Skycommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by skycommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started. Today, we are strapping into the cockpit of one of the most exciting, but arguably the most challenging areas of modern aviation, beyond visual line of sight or BVLOS drone operations.
It's a field brimming with massive, just game-changing potential. We're talking about inspecting hundreds of miles of transmission lines to delivering time-sensitive medical supplies across state lines. It's huge. But the reality today is that operating BVLOS legally in the United States, well, it requires navigating an immensely complex bespoke waiver process. Or, fundamentally, you're operating outside the boundaries set by standard Part 107 rules.
And that exact tension between massive potential and these really strict regulatory constraints, that's what we're digging into today. We had a stack of phenomenal sources shared by our learner research on advanced simulated mission planning, professional portfolio guides favored by leading operators, and some deep, often contradictory dives into the nuances of Part 107 and the proposed 14 CFR Part 108. Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is highly specific. It's really geared toward you, the professional learner. How do you, as a remote pilot, build a truly professional BVLOS-ready portfolio, one that convinces future employers, investors, and most importantly, regulators of your absolute competency, all without ever flying illegally outside of the current Part 107 visual line of sight rules?
This is the central thesis. The core concept here is that the portfolio isn't about logging unauthorized flight distance or racking up phantom BVLOS hours. That is reckless, and frankly, it's disposable. It is fundamentally about providing evidence. We are proving judgment, sound risk management, and documentation discipline under pressure. This rigorous preparation, conducted entirely within VLOS parameters, is the true shortcut to becoming a BVLOS operator, not just a pilot who happens to own a powerful drone.
And we have to anchor this entire conversation in the current legal reality. That regulatory anchor is just crucial, and you find it in the federal aviation regulations. VLOS, or visual line of sight, is the default and mandatory standard under Section 107.31, and that rule is crystal clear. The remote pilot in command and/or the visual observer must be able to see the aircraft continuously throughout the flight. That's the foundational rule we have to build readiness around. If you don't comply with that, even for a second, say, the drone slips behind a water tower, you are in BVLOS territory. And you need formal, explicit, written permission, typically a waiver, to be there.
And that permission, that waiver, as you noted, it's essentially a full-fledged safety argument, written in document form, backed by data. If you cannot articulate that safety argument, if you cannot prove that your technology and your procedures guarantee separation assurance when you can't see the aircraft, you simply will not get the authorization. Doesn't matter what your flight stick skills are. Your professional portfolio has to speak the language of sophisticated safety systems, or it's worthless.
Let's start with the vocabulary. Because if you misuse these terms in a professional setting, your entire effort at building credibility just sinks instantly. We have to establish the precise legal difference between flying legally today and preparing for the rule book of tomorrow.
Let's start with the standard, VLOS, or visual line of sight. The source material frames this perfectly, directly referencing Section 107.31. This is the core mandate. The rule requires that the RPAC, or a crew member acting as a VO, must be able to see the aircraft throughout the flight. And crucially, this visibility isn't just about knowing it's there, it's about knowing its location, its attitude, its orientation, its altitude, its direction of flight, and being able to actively scan the surrounding airspace for other hazards.
The retention hook that always sticks with me for VLOS is, vision lets operators see. Or even simpler, if you lose sight, you lose legal. This requirement is absolute, right? That brief moment when the drone dips behind a tree line or rounds a blind bend where visual contact is explicitly masked. That is an explicit breach of 107.31 unless you have proactively repositioned the crew or terminated the flight to maintain that continuous line of sight. It's a physical requirement, not a digital one.
That precise understanding of the constraint is crucial, and it leads us directly to BVLOS, beyond visual line of sight. This is the operational territory where the aircraft is no longer continuously visible to the crew as Part 107 expects. It means you're relying on redundant technology like advanced telemetry, radar systems, or complex detect and avoid mechanisms, as well as detailed procedures, rather than just your own unaided vision, for separation assurance and hazard mitigation.
And the retention hook there is so appropriate. Beyond vision, legal obligation skyrockets, because if you can't see it, you must prove on paper that you have alternate technologically backed safeguards in place. Safeguards that guarantee an equal or higher level of safety than human vision provides. That is the hurdle.
And we have to define the operational roles. The RKIC, the remote pilot in command, is defined as the person ultimately responsible and accountable for the entire operation under Part 107. Our sources accurately label the RPIC as the adult in the room, because when something goes wrong, the FAA focuses solely on the RPIC's judgment and their decision-making process.
And the VO, or visual observer. This is where we need to spend a little time on the major myth-busting nugget. I see it constantly online. People think using a VO is some kind of cheat code or a permission slip that somehow makes a BVLOS flight legal.
And this is a catastrophic misunderstanding of the regulation. It really is. A visual observer is an optional crew member used strictly to aid the RPIC in maintaining visual awareness and scanning for hazards. They do not, under any circumstances, override the requirement of Section 107.31. If you use a VO, you must still maintain effective, clear, and continuous communication and coordination regarding scanning and awareness as required by Section 107.33. The source material makes this so clear. A VO is an extra set of eyes coordinated under clear procedures, not a get-out-of-jail-free card for losing sight. If the VO loses sight or cannot communicate what they see effectively, the VLOS standard is immediately broken.
So to just summarize that foundation, VLOS is mandated, the RPIC is always accountable, and VOs are explicitly support crew, not a waiver replacement. That frame is essential because it informs the only credible way to build a BVLOS portfolio.
Right, and now we need to shift the focus entirely from piloting skill, which is, measurable in minutes flown, to professionalism, which is measured in documentation quality. You are not building a scrapbook of cool aerial photos. You are building a documented, repeatable, audit-ready risk management system.
And that professional portfolio has to establish undeniable credibility immediately. The fastest, most effective way to tank that credibility is claiming unauthorized BVLOS in flight time. No serious employer or regulator will trust a pilot who admits to intentionally violating Section 107.31. They are hiring for documentation, adherence to a repeatable process, and sound judgment that minimizes liability, not bravado.
That's why our sources are so insistent on putting a massive, unavoidable disclaimer right on the top of your portfolio document. It locks your legal frame, and it forces you to be honest. That statement should read, all flight examples are conducted within Part 107 requirements, including Section 107.31 VLOS, unless explicitly covered by a FAA authorization waiver number listed below. This portfolio demonstrates BVLOS readiness through rigorous simulated missions, detailed tabletop exercises, and VLOS mirror flights that apply BVLOS-level documentation discipline.
That disclaimer is just portfolio gold because it immediately tells any hiring manager or regulator that you understand the law. It shows that the evidence you provide is based on discipline and compliance, not reckless risk-taking. Your primary goal is to prove you can plan and document a BVLOS mission to the standard required for a waiver, even if you can only fly the mission in segmented VLS today.
And that disciplined approach is how you achieve future-proofing, which is essential given the pace of regulatory change. We have to introduce the proposed 14 CFR Part 108 again, but with a bit more detail.
The proposed Part 108 is such critical context. As noted in the sources, the FAA published a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, docket FAA 2025-1908, and it's aiming to create a scalable, structured, and routine path for BVLOS operations. It seeks to transition the industry from these one-off, unique waivers to a system built around standardized organizational structure, training, and operational oversight, often involving a formal safety management system, or SMS.
Correct. Part 108, when it's finalized, is expected to shift the focus from the individual pilot certification to the operator's organizational competency and their safety management system. Therefore, your professional portfolio should explicitly state that it is, quote, compatible with current Part 107 expectations and adaptable to the proposed Part 108 framework. This means showing evidence of continuous learning through after-action reviews, or AARs, and systematic risk assessment via the risk register. That proves you are already running an SMS structure, which is the foundational expectation of the new rule. You're effectively showing you're ready for the rulebook that hasn't even been finalized yet.
That's a powerful position to take. It says, I'm not waiting for permission to be organized. I'm organized now. Okay, so now we move from theory to construction. We are building the engine of this portfolio, and that starts with the mandatory checks you must pass before any planning even begins.
This is phase 0, the non-negotiable compliance baseline. If you skip this, everything else is simply inadmissible in a professional context. First, for U.S. operations, confirming your U.S. Part 107 remote pilot certificate is mandatory if you are acting as the RPIC. And this is especially relevant for foreign operators. Let's say someone with a Canadian Advanced Operations Pilot Certificate. The FAA has specific guidance for them, requiring a Notice of Identification, or NOI, and ensuring their foreign-registered drone is equipped with remote ID capabilities when operating in U.S. airspace. Jurisdiction is paramount.
And the next hard gate is remote ID, governed by 14 CFR Part 89. This isn't just regulatory window dressing, is it? It's foundational for scalable, complex operations because it allows the FAA and other aircraft to know who and where you are.
It has to be treated as a hard pre-flight gate, just like weather minimums. The FAA frames remote ID, which is the broadcast of identification and location information, as the groundwork for integrating more complex operations into the national airspace. That retention hook is perfect. Remote ID, license plate in the sky. In your documentation, you must include explicit RDI verification steps in your pre-flight checklists and have a clear RD failure immediate mission termination branch in your abnormal procedures. If the drone can't broadcast, it doesn't fly, period.
And finally, airspace literacy. You have to demonstrate that you plan airspace like an engineer, meticulously reading charts and facility data, not based on intuition or, vibes. This means mandatory conscious use of the UAS facility maps, or UASFM.
The facility maps are just indispensable. For those who aren't familiar, these maps show the maximum altitudes around towered airports, where the FAA may authorize Part 107 operations without requiring an exhaustive extra safety analysis. If a pilot documents their planning by showing the UASFM grid value, say 150 feet AGL, and they plan to fly at 145 feet AGL, they prove they understand the localized constraints placed on low-altitude, controlled airspace. Using them in your planning proves you understand controlled airspace processes and are not guessing or operating on old data.
So UAS facility maps equals airport neighborhood speed limits. And this data gets integrated into your case file structure, even if you're operating in uncontrolled Class G airspace 30 miles from an airport. Just to show the planning rigor and the habit formation. Here's where it gets really interesting. Once that compliance foundation is set, the professional approach organizes every single mission simulated or real VLOS flight into standardized, auditable case files. This is the template system you can duplicate and fill in quickly, proving process repeatability and consistency across different operational environments.
And that repeatability is what the FAA evaluates. A robust case file structure ensures that no critical element of operational safety or regulatory compliance is overlooked. Our sources detail 10 essential documents that form a quality system, and they mirror precisely what the FAA expects to see when reviewing a formal safety case or a waiver request. This isn't just paperwork, it's your safety proof.
Let's break down those 10 essential documents. Let's focus on the auditable purpose of each one.
Okay, first, you need the mission brief. This is the one-pager, summarized for executive review, that clearly states the objective, the specific location, the operational constraints, and the client. The auditable purpose here is simple, defining the scope of the task.
Second is the comprehensive COAN OPS, or concept of operations. This is your master operating manual for that specific mission. It details how the mission runs end to end, covering normal procedures, but also specific abnormal scenarios and detailed emergency procedures. The purpose is to demonstrate systematic planning for all outcomes, not just a successful flight.
Third is airspace access. This isn't just a screenshot. It's documentation that includes UASFM grids, confirmation of approval like LANC authorizations, and your rationale for chosen altitude and flight path relative to known control boundaries. This proves airspace competency.
Fourth, the operational volume containment plan. This is so crucial for BVLOS readiness. It maps your mission area where the drone needs to be and then overlays safety buffers. For example, a 50-foot horizontal buffer and a 25-foot vertical buffer around the mission area. You detail how these buffers are enforced, usually through programmed geofences or hard altitude limits. The auditable purpose here, proving you operate with margin.
Fifth is the risk register. This is arguably the most critical document for demonstrating BVLOS readiness, as it's the core of safety case thinking. This document has to list specific hazards like unforecasted gust 15 keats. It lists their severity and likelihood before mitigation, the specific mitigations you'll apply, and then the residual risk after mitigation. This structured quantification is the heart of waiver logic.
6th and 7th cover the human and technical safety layers. So 6th is crew roles and comms plan. This details the chain of command, the specific duties of the RPIC and VO, and the redundant communication methods. And 7th is the lost link emergency decision tree. This is a calm, scripted, step-by-step flowchart for when command and control degrades or is lost, ensuring the crew reacts uniformly based on preset thresholds, not improvisation.
8th and 9th are the core operational records. The checklists, which must read like formalized aviation documents, and the logs. And this includes flight logs, maintenance logs, and, critically, anomaly logs for documenting unexpected events, even minor ones.
And finally, the 10th document, which proves the existence of a continuous safety management system, the AAR, or after-action review. This logs what happened, compares the plan to reality, identifies gaps, and dictates how you update your procedures, checklists, or risk register for the next mission. It proves you learn from experience.
By establishing and rigorously following this 10-document system, you are showing a quality system that is scalable, repeatable, and audit-ready. You are transitioning from being a Part 107 pilot to a Part 108 ready organization.
And to truly signal range to an employer, the sources advise building these case file templates across 3 different mission archetypes, each testing a unique set of hazards.
Yes, you have to show versatility. Build templates for the rural linear mission that tests terrain and comms, the suburban perimeter mission, which tests people and vehicles, and the controlled airspace edge mission, which tests exceptional airspace planning rigor. These 3 signal to an employer that you understand the 3 vectors of risk: containment, people management, and airspace mastery.
Okay, so phase 2 is where we build BVLOS credibility without ever flying beyond VLOS. We do this through structured simulated missions or tabletop exercises, which create audit-ready evidence of judgment. This is where you generate the highest value artifacts for your portfolio.
The structure of these simulations is critical. They have to be formal, conducted with a defined RPIC, and ideally a VO, even if they're just simulated roles in the room. The sources prescribe a specific 6-step drill designed to generate the required artifacts and prove your rationale under pressure.
Step 1, pre-brief. This establishes the operational parameters. What is the mission purpose? Who are the roles? What are the absolute weather minima? And most importantly, what are the hard abort triggers that require immediate termination?
Step 2, plan. This is the execution of phase 1, where you fill in all 10 templates, the code OPS, the risk register, the decision tree, creating a complete audit-ready mission package before the simulation even starts.
Step 3 is the execute timeline. This is where the exercise begins. You narrate the mission progression minute by minute, and then at set times, you inject pre-planned failures or unexpected events. This simulation allows you to rehearse rare, high-consequence failures, like a sudden change in wind or link drop without any real-world consequences, forcing the RPIC to make a quick, safe decision.
Step 4 is the most important artifact generator, the decision log, live. The RPIC, or a dedicated note-taker, must record in real time the entire process flow. Trigger right arrow decision right arrow outcome. For example, trigger, gusts hit 13 knots. Decision, initiated RTH sequence immediately. Y exceeds risk register threshold of 12 knots. Outcome, aircraft returns safely, 30% mission data incomplete. This log proves judgment and rationale. Then comes step 5, the AAR, after-action review, where you dissect the entire exercise in a formalized meeting format. What assumptions failed, what decision was delayed, what needs to change. And finally, step 6, revision. You take the lessons learned from the AAR, the gaps, the delays, the near misses, and you immediately update your checklists, risk register entries, or Kiko 1PS to V2 point inside. This demonstrates a core SMS principle. You learn and improve your system after every event, both real and simulated.
This methodology achieves the ultimate goal: creating evidence that is directly consistent with how the FAA evaluates safety explanations, namely hazard identification, the application of mitigations, and the quantified rationale showing those mitigations reduce residual risk to an acceptable level. Okay, so let's run through a few critical scenarios that mirror complex BVLOS challenges while generating these high-value portfolio artifacts. Let's start with scenario 1, ridgeline corridor. which is all about terrain masking.
Right. The situation is the classic linear corridor challenge may be collecting imagery along a remote utility right-of-way. The issue is rolling terrain. You know that the aircraft will briefly dip behind the next ridge, which immediately steals the continuous VLOS ability required by Section 107.31.
So what are the injects, the things that make it go wrong? The outline says at T+06, the ridge blocks your sightline for 15 seconds. At T+08, your visual observer, positioned on the next high point, claims via radio, "I've got it," but their voice is breaking up. You realize you never tested the radio strength. Then, at T+10, telemetry data shows the drone is drifting dangerously close to a dense tree line due to an unforecasted microwind.
The pro-action requires a termination mindset. The RPIC must immediately stop the flight before the ridge break. If the VO's comms are degraded, the VO is useless, and the RPIC has to land the aircraft immediately because the VLOS standard can't be met. The RPIC might reposition the launch site or the crew, or more likely segment the route into short, manageable VLOS-only hops, requiring landing, crew movement, and relaunch. Crucially, you have to document that failure to establish reliable VO comms.
The high-value portfolio artifacts here would be the corridor Kono PS with a detailed segmentation strategy, a map showing your planned leapfrog VLS stations, how you'd legally move crew along the line, and specific risk register entries detailing terrain masking, link degradation, and the required contingency abort triggers. This artifact proves you value compliance over completion.
Exactly. Okay, scenario 2. Solar farm perimeter. This is all about worksite control, boundary management, and handling human factors. All critical BVLOS risks, even if the flight is short and visible. The situation is a large, secure, but active construction site. Easy to fly, but hard to manage unexpected ground movements.
And the injects test your discipline under social stress. A worker walks right into your sterile launch zone. Then the site manager pressures you to go higher and faster because they're behind schedule. And at T+11, trucks unexpectedly enter the work area directly beneath your planned flight path.
The pro-action is discipline and clear communication. The RPIC must have established a sterile launch landing zone using cones or tape during planning. And they must immediately enforce a simple pause, hold, terminate protocol if boundaries are breached. When pressured, the RPIC has to maintain professionalism while quoting the regulatory constraint. You are responsible for every person on the ground beneath that drone.
The key artifacts are a detailed public interaction script and a decision log that captures exactly what I say when pressured. Something like, "Sir, I understand the pressure, but my 107 certificate requires I maintain separation distance from non-participating persons. If we proceed now, I must terminate the mission. We need 15 minutes to clear the zone." You also include the detailed site containment plan, proving you treat the ground area as seriously as the airspace.
Right. Scenario 3. Controlled airspace edge. This scenario is a pure test of planning rigor. Your mission site is critically near controlled airspace, and you are using UAS facility maps which show those limiting altitude grids.
Inject. At T+01, you discover the actual airspace boundary is 50 feet closer than you assumed. At T+05, your planned mission altitude of 200 feet AGL exceeds the actual UASFM grid value of 180 feet. And the classic pressure test at T+09, the client asks you to just ignore the 180 feet. It's only 20 feet. We're not that close to the airport.
The pro-action is to treat airspace limits like engineering tolerances. You must replan immediately. You reduce altitude to 175 feet, or you shift the launch point to a grid with a higher authorized altitude, or you shrink the operational area. You have to document the authorization approach you would take if the client insisted on 200 feet.
Portfolio gold here is the airspace access sheet, complete with the UASFM screenshot clearly marked with your planned path and the rationale for why you chose that launch spot. The alternate launch location decision log proves you're not fighting the airspace, but adapting professionally and conservatively. This teaches that true BVLOS readiness requires you to be uncompromisingly airspace literate.
And we should circle back to a critical compliance item, remote ID. Scenario 4, remote ID failure.
Yeah.
You called it the license plate in the sky. But what happens when that license plate fails at T+04? This tests immediate compliance versus mission pressure. The drones have been updated, but the RID broadcast is suddenly failing intermittently.
And the inject is simple. At T+04, your GCS displays an alert. Part 89, broadcast degradation failure. The flight is otherwise fine, but the system is warning you. And at T+06, the client asks why you're hesitating, saying, "The drone looks fine, keep going."
The pro-action is an immediate scripted termination. Remote ID is a mandatory compliance gate under Part 89. A failure to broadcast means the flight must stop immediately, regardless of mission progress or visual line of sight. The pilot must land the aircraft safely and terminate the mission. The only acceptable response to the client is that the aircraft is non-compliant with federal regulations and cannot proceed.
The critical portfolio artifacts here are the specific RID failure log entry detailing the time, the error message, and the immediate RPIC action. For example, T+04, Part 89 error. Immediate manual RTH initiated per COMPS, cause, unknown broadcast module anomaly. This demonstrates that you treat mandatory regulatory technology as an absolute abort trigger.
Right. Next up, Scenario 5, lost link that isn't a panic event. This is about C2 degradation. BVLOS readiness is often C2 management dressed up as a flight problem. The situation is gradual, systemic link degradation. Crucially, your pre-programmed automatic return-to-home behavior could create a new hazard if the aircraft climbs over people or obstacles during the automated return.
Inject. At T+05, you see increasing latency and intermittent video freeze. Your C2 connection quality drops to a warning threshold. T+07, a brief, full-length drop occurs, but the aircraft doesn't immediately initiate RTH. T+10, the wind increases, and the battery reserve is shrinking toward your abort threshold.
The pro-action is never improvisation. It must be a calm, scripted adherence to the decision tree. If the link quality hits your predefined terminate threshold, you terminate early, initiating a manual or pre-scripted land sequence that avoids climbing into potential conflicts. You log the entire anomaly and use the AAR to dissect why the aircraft didn't immediately initiate RTH, potentially requiring a software or firmware revision.
And the portfolio artifacts are immensely valuable here. You need the loss link decision tree itself, detailing the trigger, the expected aircraft behavior, the mandatory crew actions, and the escalation steps. You also include the detailed link event log and the subsequent AAR showing how you revise the C2 contingency section of your CONOPS. This teaches that BVLS readiness is built on calm, scripted responses under degradation, proving stability over speed.
Okay, one more. Scenario 6. Client request for extreme endurance. This is an engineering scenario. The client wants a single, uninterrupted 45-minute flight to cover a large area, pushing the battery life and ignoring weather margin. The situation. The required mission time pushes the drone's battery to a 10% reserve, well below your company's mandated 30% reserve threshold for complex missions.
And the injects are classic. The client argues that the battery gauge is reliable and 10% is fine. You check the forecast again and see a 15% probability of light rain within the mission window. And the aircraft is 1,000 meters away at the turnaround point, and the RTH calculation shows the final minutes will be at a low state of charge, reducing performance margin.
The pro-action is safety-centric. You refuse the single flight. You propose segmenting the mission into 2 or 3 shorter legs, allowing battery changes and fresh pre-flight checks, ensuring a minimum 30% reserve margin on every leg. You explain to the client that the high state of charge is a safety buffer for unforecasted wind and emergency obstacle avoidance, which is non-negotiable.
The portfolio artifacts here include the endurance calculation sheet showing the 2-flight plan versus the 1-flight risk, the risk register entry for low state of charge, mitigated by segmentation, and the decision log entry detailing the client refusal. This demonstrates that you prioritize energy management and mandated safety buffers over immediate client gratification. Okay, so moving from those detailed scenarios to advanced judgment, this is where you transition from being a technically skilled pilot to a sophisticated operator who manages complex risk portfolios and organizational discipline.
This next scenario is the final examination for professional maturity. We'll call it the client negotiation pressure test. The situation is a highly successful flight, and the client, energized by the results, wants just another 800 meters down the corridor. Or they offer a bonus to push the distance, tempting the RPIC because the aircraft is kind of visible if I squint.
This raises a really important question. Why must a professional operator hold the line? Why risk losing the potential bonus, or even the client, in that moment of operational success?
Because you are proving organizational discipline. The Section 107.31 VLOS requirements are non-negotiable by the client. Bending the rules for money or social pressure immediately demonstrates poor judgment and a willingness to compromise regulatory compliance. This is the exact opposite of what a serious safety manager, an insurer, or a BVLOS waiver evaluator wants to see. If you bend the VLOS rule, what other safety protocol will you bend later when the aircraft is 10 miles away?
The pro-action is calm, firm professionalism. The RPIC turns to the client and says, I understand the need for more coverage, but my Part 107 certificate requires continuous visual line of sight, and adding 800 meters would violate federal law. My process is non-negotiable. You then immediately offer alternatives: repositioning the launch point, segmenting the operation, or scheduling a future waiver pathway, clearly differentiating between your operational service and your legal obligation. and you log the interaction in detail for your AAR.
The portfolio artifacts are the calm, firm client pressure script, which shows you have internalized the required language of compliance, and the decision log showing refusal to bend rules. Crucially, you include an updated mission pricing model that charges for professional repositioning and additional flights, which rewards safe behavior rather than penalizing it.
Let's discuss the single most powerful shift in mindset a pilot can make. Thinking like an FAA evaluator reviews a Part 107 waiver application.
What's so fascinating here is that even if you never intend to apply for a waiver, designing your missions as if you're preparing one makes you exponentially better. The FAA explicitly expects applicants for waivers to identify every potential hazard, define redundant mitigations for each, and provide the rationale and data showing those mitigations reduce the risk to an acceptable level, which is usually defined as having a risk level equal to or less than existing VLOS operations.
This is where we bring it back to that SMS mindset. I like to think of it like filing your taxes. The FAA doesn't just want to know you made a deduction. They want the receipts, the forms, and the rationale showing why that deduction is legal. In drones, the receipts are the data logs, the rationale is the risk register, and the forms are your cone OPS and checklists.
Absolutely. So we build a mock waiver appendix. This forces the pilot to structure their documentation around safety controls and residual risk calculation rather than simply operational efficiency. The structure of this mock appendix demonstrates true safety case thinking.
Detail the required mock components. What does this appendix need?
First, the comprehensive cone OPS is the backbone. Then, the risk register must show quantifiable risk reduction. You need to use a clear scoring mechanism, say a 5x5 matrix for severity likelihood, and show the score before mitigation and the score after implementing mitigations. And you have to justify why that final risk score is acceptable. You must also detail your required training requirements for the crew, like proof of quarterly simulated loss-linked drills. You must include a section on abnormal procedures, and finally your quality assurance plan, which is effectively your formalized AAR process, proving how you continuously self-correct. This documented structure is the intellectual bridge from pilot to operator.
It shifts the focus entirely from I can fly smoothly to I can prove this entire operation is safe, repeatable, auditable, and constantly improving. Finally, let's look at the edges of operations, the highly complex environments that truly separate the senior professionals from the casual operators. First, cross-border competence.
Planning operations near international borders, like the U.S.-Canada line or the U.S.-Mexico line, is the highest level sign of maturity. It proves you operate with a massive legal and operational margin, not bravado. The risk is jurisdictional, not just safety. Crossing an international boundary, even due to minor wind drift, creates a complex geopolitical headache.
The professional move is to establish a clear jurisdiction box in your mission brief that explicitly states the country of operation, the governing authority, the pilot credential basis, and clear data and privacy notes. You need a strict containment plan that includes a geofence with an extreme buffer, say, double the normal buffer size setting, and a BORT trigger based on drift margin well before the boundary.
And if you are a foreign operator flying in the U.S., you must also document your compliance with the Notice of Identification requirements for foreign registered drones with remote ID. This detailed planning shows that you understand the regulatory environment shifts instantly when crossing a boundary, and that you plan conservatively to avoid international incidents caused by simple wind drift.
And what about the urban canyon? RF, multipath, and navigation integrity.
The urban environment presents a unique technical challenge, moving from external collision hazards to internal navigation integrity issues. The situation is operating between tall buildings where GNSS accuracy degrades rapidly, compass warnings appear constantly, and the command and control link behaves oddly due to multipath reflections. This is where you demonstrate deep knowledge of the technology's limitations. The proaction must be to immediately reduce complexity, increase standoff distance from structures, reduce speed significantly, and shorten the legs of the mission. You must pre-select secondary emergency landing areas that are free of pedestrian traffic. And, crucially, you log the abnormal GNSS or compass warnings and add a specific GNSS degrade procedure to your playbook, such as immediately switching to attitude mode or performing a controlled descent if position lock is lost.
The artifacts here are the abnormal ops playbook that details the GNSS degrade procedure and the environmental risk register that lists specialized hazards like RF interference, multipath effects, and building turbulence. This proves you don't just trust the technology, you understand and plan around its critical failure modes. Wow, we've covered a massive amount of ground, moving from the strict legal definitions of VLS and BVLS through the creation of a 10-document case file quality system, and finally to advanced judgment training using failure injects, regulatory compliance tests, and client pressure scenarios.
To reiterate the two essential tracks for building a successful portfolio, Track A is the rigorous tabletop simulations with failure injects, generating your quantified risk register, loss-linked decision trees, and decision logs. Track B is VLS mirror flights, where you fly legally within VLS but apply full BVLS level discipline and documentation, creating real-world flight logs, maintenance schedules, and auditable ARRs.
And the key artifacts that will convince any safety manager you're ready are the risk register with quantified risk reduction rationale, the detailed loss-linked decision tree, the scripted response to client pressure, and the explicit evidence of continuous learning via your after-action reviews.
And remember the regulatory context. The FAA has published the proposed Part 108 rule to normalize BVLOS operations. That rule is the inevitable future framework. While we wait for the final rule, your competition is still focused purely on logging basic flight hours.
So what does this all mean? Your professional objective needs to shift entirely. Your job is to focus on something entirely different: audit readiness. The future of commercial drone work isn't about how smoothly you fly. It's about how clean, consistent, and legally defensible your documentation is. Your portfolio needs to read and feel like an operator's manual for a certified organizational safety system.
So the challenge for you, the learner, is this. Which of your three mission archetypes, the rural corridor, the suburban perimeter, or the airspace edge, will you choose to build your first full 10-document case file for this week, proving your process is already ready for the rulebook that hasn't even been finalized yet?
That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above, go beyond, get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.